everyone. I'm going to read Corn is Maize, The Gift of the Indians, written and illustrated by Aliki. There's some corn drying. And there's a corn cob with the kernels coming off. This is a kernel of corn. It is a corn seed. Kernels of corn are planted in a small hill of good earth. The sun shines down on them. Spring rains water the soil. The hard seeds soften and sprout. A leaf appears and a stalk begins to grow. More leaves come from joints called nodes. A corn stalk shoots up fast. Farmers say that on a quiet evening they can hear the corn growing. By midsummer the plant is taller than a farmer. Husks have begun to sprout from the nodes. A husk is a bundle of leaves tightly wrapped around strands of silk. The corn silk is the female part of the plant. Tassels grow like a hat at the top of the stalk. The tassels are the male flowers. In the summer breeze, clouds of tiny grains of pollen blow from the tassels. The pollen falls on the silk of neighboring corn plants. Each pollen grain pollinates the strand of silk it sticks to. After fertilization, a kernel of corn will grow at the end of each strand. Here's a picture. This is a corn husk. There's pollen at the tip. This is the corn silk. The pollen travels down the silk. At the end of each silk is an egg. When the pollen reaches the egg, it pollinates it. The egg will become a kernel of corn. So this little thing here is going to become one of the kernels of corn. The corn husk grows. Inside the wrapped leaves, hundreds of kernels grow into an ear of corn. The silk turns from a creamy color to dark red to brown. Just before it turns brown, it is time to pick the corn and husk it. The husks and the silk are pulled away. The sweet, juicy ear of corn is ready to cook and eat. Farmers leave some ears on the stalk. The brown silk dries. The kernels harden and are saved. They are seeds for the next crop. So the dried ones are being put in this bag to collect, to save for next year. Many plants can grow wild. The wind scatters their seeds over the earth and they can grow. Corn kernels cannot fly off the ear and scatter. If an ear fell to the ground, a sprout would grow from each kernel. The new sprouts would grow in a tangled heap and die. Corn cannot grow by itself. Corn seeds must be planted so there's space around each hill for the tall plants to grow. The plants must be weeded or the baby sprouts will be choked. Corn cannot grow without the help of people. Then where did corn come from? How did it start? For many years there was no answer. It was a mystery. Scientists knew corn belongs to the same grain family as wheat, rye, oats, barley, and rice. They are all grass plants. They all have jointed stems and nodes. They all grow wild, but although scientists searched, they had never found any wild corn. Not long ago, they found some. It was in a cave in Mexico where people once lived. They found scraps of plants and tiny ears of ancient corn more than 5,000 years old. It was not like any the scientists had ever seen. At last they could piece together the story of how corn began. Thousands of years ago, people lived in caves in South and Central America. They planted the seeds of a wild grass, perhaps one found in the cave. Scientists think the ancient plant was a tall stalk with one ear at the top. The tassel grew out of the ear. Each tiny orange or brown kernel was wrapped in its own husk or pod. The kernels grew so loosely they could fall off the cob and plant themselves. The cave dwellers planted and cared for this pod corn. In time, some scientists think the pollen of another grass, called teosinte, or pollen of other plants, fertilized the corn. It took hundreds of years for the plants to grow stronger and the ears larger. So here's teosinte growing wild, and they're collecting it. This says pollens of other plants and teosinte mixed with each other, mixed with pod corn to make bigger and bigger ears of corn. It's starting to look more like what we know now. People found the grain was good for them. It made them stronger than just beans, squash, and other plants they knew about. Tribes in the north began to grow corn too. In time, people in all the Americas were growing different kinds. They learned the right time to plant according to their climate. Different tribes planted in different ways. Some tribes planted 5 seeds in a hill, others planted 2. Some tribes planted bean seeds with the corn kernels, so the vine could grow up the stalk. Many tribes learned to bury a fish in each hill. The fish rotted and made good soil. So there's the fish underneath where they planted the seeds. That gives it fertilization, nice fertile soil. By the time Christopher Columbus landed in the New World, the people he called Indians were expert farmers. The women tended the crops while the men hunted. They harvested the corn. Some of it they ate fresh, most of it they dried. They saved some for seed. The rest they ground into meal on a flat stone called a metate. They ate the meal dry or made bread with it. They cooked it into mush. People from Mexico used cornmeal to make pancakes called tortillas. They made tamales by wrapping spiced meat mixed with meal in husks and boiling them. Many tribes boiled tiny tender corn in the husks and ate the ears whole. They ate corn on the cob. They popped it. Tribes in the north cooked corn with beans and called it misicotash. Indians ate the tassels of the corn plant and sucked the sweet, fresh stalks. There's somebody here with dry cornmeal. There's a corn stalk that they're sucking. Tamales, masiquatash, which we call succotash, popcorn, corn on the cob, and tortillas being made down here. They learned to store corn for the long winter ahead. The corn, the people's only grain, was their main food. Their lives depended on it. Corn was so important to them. The various tribes prayed to the corn gods they believed had sent it to them. This illustration shows how Hidatsa Indians stored the corn in the ground. So there's a big container here of the corn. They put grass here, and then earth, and then ashes up on top to keep it inside the ground. So here's some ancient corn gods for you to look at. They had festivals at planting time and at harvest. They chanted and made music, and each tribe danced its own corn dance. These are the Pueblo people from Arizona, New Mexico area dancing the corn dance today. When Christopher Columbus returned to Europe, he told of the people and the grain they grew. He called it maize, which sounded like the name the Indians had used. Even today, the correct word for corn is maize. The word corn means grain. Corn is also the word used for the most important grain a country grows. In some countries, wheat is called corn. In others, oats are called corn. The Pilgrims called maize Indian corn, and Americans have called it corn ever since. So here are different kinds of corn down here. There's maize. When the Pilgrims landed in America, maize saved their lives. The people gave them the dried grain to eat and showed them how to plant the crop. On the first Thanksgiving, the Pilgrims and the people together gave thanks for the corn harvest, as the Indians had done long before. The Pilgrims learned other things. They stuffed mattresses with husks, burned cobs for fuel. Those are cobs down here being used to cook their food. They made corn shuck dolls too. So there's a doll made with the corn husks all kind of tied together to make it look like a doll. Today, people all over the world grow corn. There are many, many kinds. Here are some: pop, sweet, flour, flint, dent, pod. We eat only sweet corn and use popcorn for popping. The rest is used to feed animals and to make corn flour, cornmeal, cornstarch, corn oil and corn syrup, cereal, baby powder, glue, soap, medicine, and many other things. Now scientists have developed new kinds of corn that have more and better protein than any other kind. People need protein to make them strong and healthy. Scientists hope someday this new corn will help many hungry people in the world. On large farms today, machines help farmers plow and sow seeds. A harvester picks corn and dries it so it can be stored without rotting. Then it's taken to a mill to be ground. This is an early mill run by water. Today's mills are run by electricity. So here's a water wheel that turns. And inside here, there's a special stone called a millstone. So the seeds are poured on top. This is the miller pouring them in. And that gets turned by this, and this gets turned here, and the seeds are ground into a flour. The flour is coming down this chute here, and somebody here is collecting it. Here's a farmer bringing corn seeds in to be ground. But not all corn is planted and ground by machines. In parts of America, farmers still grow their corn. They plant the seeds as their ancestors once did. They care for the plant, harvest it, and grind it on a metate. And they praise the corn that has fed their people for thousands of years.